Helo pawb, croeso I podlediad Urdd Derwyddon Ynys Môn yma I lawr yn Coventry yng nghanol Lloegr ar gyfer gwyl paganiaid ac gwrachod. Welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Anglesey Druid Order podcast. We're coming to you from Coventry at the Heart of England Conference Centre for the Festival of Pagans and Witches. You are all very, very welcome to this space and this other new conversation in Druidry, this time with the lovely, the fabulous, the enigmatic, the awfully articulate Dewi Hughes.
What can I say after a build-up like that? Wow.
Can you live up to that build-up? That's the thing.
Well, the articulate possibly, although I might run out of words. With the words I have, I can probably articulate reasonably.
I doubt you would ever run out of words, Dewi.
I seem to do all right for them, don't I?
We do. So we're here in Coventry, near Coventry, Meriden, the very centre of England.
Yes.
We're the furthest point away from the sea. Yeah, we are. The
right?
Furthest point from the sea in England.
Ooh.
So the very heart of England. And I find that quite peculiar, actually, because I always find that because I live by the sea, it's amazing how you can smell it, hear it, sense it, even when you're not aware that you are hearing, smelling and sensing it.
Yeah.
When you're not there, like when I'm somewhere like this, I'm very aware that the sea isn't there. It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
Its presence is so tantamount to our daily experience. It's always there.
Yeah.
And then you come somewhere like this where you just hear the drone of the M6 in the distance. When we're in a festival of 2,500 pagans and witches and druids.
Yes.
It's quite peculiar. But I first met you in another peculiar place.
Yes.
Glastonbury.
Glastonbury, and in the Labyrinth bookshop in Glastonbury.
Was it Labyrinth Books?
It was Labyrinth Books, and I still remember it to this day because I'd been reading your books, and I had one of your books with me, and I didn't know that at the time it was the Obod Summer Gathering, and I just joined Obod, and so I come there on holiday. I was with Lizzie, my wife, and her friend Bex, and we were. And I suddenly started noticing, there's Philip Cargom. I know him. Oh, hang on, that's Penny. And then and I was thinking, I wonder if Kristoffer Hughes is here. And I happened to have your book in my bag, and I went wandering up the high streets. And I always go into Labyrinth because I get on really well with the guy who used to run it and now still manages it, Jim. And went in to speak to him, and lo and behold, I found you, and you were chatting to a couple of others.
I materialised.
You did, and I pulled my book out, and I was like a little child, sort of clutching this book. And when you finished with your friends, I sort of came up to you and said, "Hello, are you Kristoffer Hughes?" And you were so lovely, and you said, "Yes." Would you mind signing my book? And you did. You signed it. You were wonderful. You were friendly. You were very sort of interested in me and what I was doing. And I just remember at the time it was a little bit overwhelming. Just to, it always is. I think when you're reading the work of somebody who you respect, and you have that opportunity to sort of meet them in person. And I think when they're a distant person, you don't know that person as someone to interact with. And so getting over that, I think, was a significant thing for me. But then we met again. It was another festival we met at not long after, and we actually had a good chat over the Ceridwen book,
right?
Which was the next book I read, and which I you may not agree, but I still think it's certainly my favourite book of yours.
Oh, thank you.
So,
thank you so much.
Well, there's depth to it.
Thank you.
There was something that I was really looking for in the books I was reading. So,
yeah. So we share the same surname.
We do.
So the implication there is because people who are listening or watching this might think, he doesn't sound very Welsh, but you are Welsh.
I am Welsh.
You are.
I was born in North Wales, but over on the eastern side of North Wales, so
Right.
close to Wrexham.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born there. I grew up in the Wrexham area. I had Welsh lessons when I was in school. That was a mandatory part of the education system. Now, although I had Welsh speakers in my family, my father, who was the Welsh speaker, died unfortunately when I was very young. And so I didn't grow up in a Welsh speaking family, although my mum tried really hard and was, she still used as a smattering of Welsh. And I didn't see much of my father's side of the family, so I wasn't really immersed within the language in that way.
Yeah.
In the sense that I was speaking it all the time, but it was there, and there is definitely a sense of the culture there. The stories are there; they're translated into English. But I remember being given my grandfather's copy of the Mabinogion, which was the old Everyman edition.
Oh my word, Gantz and Gantz.
Yeah.
Gantz and Jones and Jones, maybe. Was it the Gantz?
I think maybe Jones and Jones, but I remember thinking back to it because it was my grandfather's. My grandfather was a Welsh speaker, but it was a translation in English, and I've always found that a little bit odd that was how he got to grips with the Mabinogion.
Yeah.
But I started reading that, and I was mad about stories of King Arthur when I was a child, and reading the Mabinogion and getting sort of deeper into those stories, which for me, coming from where I was, they were much more sort of mysterious. And some of the King Arthur stories are mysterious, but those stories were really on another level of mysterious. And I've always found them fascinating for that reason.
So was that because you're still involved in stories and storytelling, because your professional life is you're an actor.
I am, yes.
You're a vocal coach.
Yes. I should probably list vocal coach first, because that's what I do mainly. But I do also act.
Yeah.
And I get paid to act, which is, yes.
Rather spectacular.
Yeah.
Which is all about storytelling, right?
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Was there, so how many years now have you been within the Druid spectrum?
Not that long. I joined OBOD, which was my first foray into Druid. I'd read a lot of books first. The first book on Druidry I actually read was Penny's.
The Path of Druidry.
Druidry, which I read, and of course that's very Mabinogion based. So immediately I thought, oh yeah, this sounds exactly what I'm interested in. And I joined not long after the pandemic. I think, like a lot of people, there were a lot of people who for whom that period was a great time of change. And so I decided then to take action and to actually thought, no, this is something I really want to explore. So that's when I joined OBOD. So it was only a year or so after the sort of the heat of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I started doing the courses that they offer, and I started attending things, and then we met actually in the context of one of the OBOD summer gatherings. It was the year after I'd met you, and I got very interested in the work of the ADO, and because again, as well as having the interest in the stories of the Mabinogion, I was interested in the language as well. I think I've gotten slightly away because we were talking about story and the...
No, I think it's all interlinked, because it sounds as if what you're describing in a way is because you were raised and nurtured with those stories. They're still a fundamental part of our Druid practice. So it sounds as if what you're describing is that stories was like your gateway drug into all of this, Because was there a point where, was it something that you had always thought about or had explored previously, this whole polytheistic druidic tradition, or did it suddenly just come out of the blue and drew you in?
No, well, I've been interested in the pagan scene for a long time. So I had a lot of friends in the pagan scene. I had I spent a short time working with different groups. There was a pub moot I went to for a long time called the Moot with No Name, which was run by Steve Wilson. I don't know
Oh
if you
my word!
remember him.
Yeah.
But,
That's a blast from the past.
yeah. And that was fascinating because you got like every week and every couple of weeks we'd have a different speaker who would be talking on different subjects. And, and I met several people through that. And that all started, that was early 2000s, I think. And so I was interested because I was already aware of stories being a central part of that, but also, I suppose, something that I'm quite a romantic person, capital R romantic.
Yeah.
And the idea of taking inspiration from the natural world, I think, has been a big part of me for a long time. And I don't think you can get far along the path of enjoying the romantic poets in the present day and age without encountering some paganism. I mean, you just need to look at just read Wordsworth, standing on a promontory and declaring, "I wish I was a pagan," or "I'd rather be a pagan," and without discovering paganism in some form. It took me a long time to really find my feet and to know what it was that meant to me and what it was. So I'd encountered various ideas of deity, but none of it really made sense to me, or none of it really clicked. And I'd grown up in the Christian church, and that had fed my ideas of deity to a great deal. But I think until that moment of inspiration hits, where something goes, this is it, or at least at the moment, at this point in time, this is the thing that I'm following. I think, it's you're just waiting for that moment. So it took 25 years, about nearly 25 years before I found something that really clicked with me.
Yeah. So you live in London?
I do, yes.
And so what does that urban Druidry look like? Because I often hear people saying, that they find it problematic to connect with paganism when they live in cities, but I've never felt that particularly. I've worked in London for a number of years, and it didn't diminish my paganism in any sense. But what's your experience of that been like? The genius loci, are there sacred sites in London, and green spaces? There certainly is an awful lot of green spaces. But what does your urban sense of Druidry look like?
Well, you're right. There are plenty of green spaces, and I've, for various points in my life, I've spent a lot of time in those green spaces when I can. There's something of a lifeline. So I'm part of a group called Tamesis, the Tamesis Grove, which is run by the very wonderful Ferdiad McGowan. And I cannot say, I feel I should say this to camera, that Ferdiad has collected a wonderful group, and which is very pro accessibility, and really makes an effort to ensure that the gatherings are something everybody can participate in. And I'm very, very happy where I am. But through Tamesis, I've discovered a lot of the sites that I would regard as sacred sites within London. I think as well, there's an energy to the city. Human beings are nature, and this is a theme that pops up again and again. So you're not away from nature because there are human beings there. And yes, okay, there are heavily concreted areas, and there are places which feel very cold and decked. I think that's why having druids in the city is actually, dare I say, more important. That actually having somebody with a sense of, or who seeks the mystical within the leaf and the twig and the flower, in a place where you really have to hunt those things down, is an important thing for the kind of lifeblood and the imagination of the city.
That's a really nice way of putting it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I even, there's a poem I wrote. I'm quite fond of writing poems, as you probably know. And I wrote a poem about the wild hunt. And I tied it in with the sort of Kalangaev period, the Samhain period. And I took the inspiration, the idea of a figure leading the wild hunt through the streets of London.
Oh, wow.
And the idea of these sort of otherworldly beings and the, pouring through the streets of London at this given point. And for me, that was about sort of making that connection, about sort of going, these myths and stories, they're about nature for us, but they're also very human in their essence.
Yeah.
So actually where humans gather, surely figures like that would also gather.
They would. They'd be naturally drawn to it, right?
Yeah.
As we pull on those energies and draw them in. And I love, I can't remember for the life of me the name of the author, but there was some chap who wrote a series of books, The Rivers of London.
Yes, Ben Aronovich.
Yeah. And it gave me an entire different perspective on the sacredness of London and how that hierophany, the sense of the sacred bleeding through the mundane and into the ordinary streets of London, and particularly with Tamesis as well, being the god of the Thames, being central and kind of a bit miffed, and he took himself back to Oxford, which I loved. That modern novel has a deep sense of profundity to it, that even novels and the imagination of a person who obviously has a deep connection to a city is able to translate that in a way that is highly romantic, but also deeply profound. These rivers, these the life force and the veins of the city, they're still there, and you have to look for them in the names of streets and names of places, and then understanding that these rivers are still there, but they're under the ground, they're under buildings, but they're still feeding it. And I love that hidden mysticism.
It still amazes me that you can stand on the platform in Sloane Square Underground, and there is a pipe that carries one of the rivers through the underground station, and it flows overhead. You can't see the water, but the pipe is there, and it's just there to direct that bit of river or stream or whatever it is at that point.
Oh, wow.
Which is, and there's all sorts of, when the rivers are because as you say, so many of them, they're underground, and we know there are sort of mysterious pockets, because there's been so much building on and over, that there's so much subterranean London that's there.
Oh, yes, so much. I found that when I was working in London, so I was fairly lucky. I worked in West London, in Ealing, right? Middlesex, technically.
That's where I work, actually.
Is it really?
I work in Ealing.
How did I not know that? I've known you for several years now. Really? Gosh. And I lived in Hanwell.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, like London Borough of Ealing, right? Or is it a London Borough of Ealing? It is. The London Borough of Ealing. Yeah. But I also found that I was very lucky there because we had the Brent Canal. Is it the Brent Canal or one of those? There's
one of those. I know there is that runs. Is it the Northern?
That's it. Yes. Yeah. They run through Hanwell, doesn't it? And down off to Brentwood. I think.
Yeah.
And which I found a stunning green space. But I was then introduced. So this may sound a little grim and a little unexpected. Apologies for that. But I worked for the coroner. So I was working at a coroner's morgue facility, and we had to go and do an exhumation. And it was at Kensal Green Cemetery. I'd never been to, and it is enormous. And the cemeteries of London, I suddenly discovered that, oh my word, these are incredible spaces, not only of tranquility and peace, but like so much history.
Oh, yeah.
So much history of London in these cemeteries. And those were my sanctuaries of peace, I think. And my work was busy. London is busy. And so I was making use of cemeteries an awful lot because there was never an awful lot of people in them.
Yes.
No, which always surprised me.
No, I absolutely. Have you visited Highgate Cemetery?
I have.
Yeah.
I have, yes.
Which is,
oh my word.
It's so overgrown.
Oh, it's like being in Bram Stoker's Dracula or something.
Yes.
It is just the sense of the Victorian macabre
Mm.
and the grandness of that macabreness
Yes.
stamped on Highgate Cemetery. And then all the folklore, the Highgate vampire, and all these apparitions and ghosts. I love the fact that cities can be such a vast, rich resource of stories. They're on every corner, and I think it was captured quite beautifully actually in a fairly recent movie, but it was something that I already knew about. I think the movie was called Last Christmas, and it had that actress from the Game of Thrones in it, Emilia Clarke, I think.
Yes.
And there's a line in that which I was already aware of, that whenever you're in London, always look up.
Yes.
Don't look down, look up. The stunning architecture, again, is telling its own story, right? It's just a rich landscape of story. And I always find that I live on the Isle of Anglesey, and so many of my myths are, quite a lot of them are based within that region of Wales. But there's this peculiar link that I really enjoy, because I'm not very far from Aberfraw, one of the last royal seats of Wales.
Yeah.
And of course, home to Bran. To Bran the Blessed, and Branwen, and Manawydan, and Efnisien and Nisien. There on Anglesey, and Harlech, and there's Castell Bran in Llangollen. But then there's this other link with Bran, and that's to the White Mount, which is the Tower of London.
In London, yeah.
And whenever I go to London at any occasion, if I've got some time, I like to go to that particular part, because it is intimately connected to my own mythology, but in a way that reminds me that my mythology isn't insular. It isn't limited or restricted to the West. It was pushed over there, but strands of it couldn't be pushed.
No.
The strands remained where they originally were. So you've got, not only this tower in the middle of the city of London, but it's festooned with corvids.
Yes.
I'm like, and that still blows my mind.
Ravens, particularly, which are, so not just crows, no offense to crows, but, the fact that they are ravens, I think is incredible, because, of course, that does connect back to Branwen. And the idea of the White Mount as a sacred place. There is one of the secular Druid orders, I think, does a regular, like each year, I think they do a ceremony there.
Yes, so they're called the Druid Order.
Right.
Yes. And they're pretty old. They go all the way back to the universal bond of the Brotherhood of Man. So they go all the way back to the very early 20th century. And they're still there, and they wear clothes very similar to what we wear in the Gorsedd of Bards in the National Eisteddfod. They have the wimple, and the long white gowns, But I think they gather around the White Mount as well. I've seen so many pictures, because you can see London. Is it London Bridge or Tower Bridge that you can see from there? It's Tower Bridge.
Tower Bridge. Yeah.
So there's that. Because I think I speak to so many people who are either new to Druidry, or they've just been in it a couple of years or so, who sometimes struggle when they consider some of the myths that are so prevalent in modern Druidry, particularly those that are Welsh, or written in Welsh, or preserved in Welsh.
Yeah.
And I always think that it's really important to remind those people when they voice those concerns that, actually, there's so much more than that. Because look at this connection. Look at this connection to London, and to Bran, and the fact that we still have within contemporary vernacular folklore that if anything happens to those ravens, Britain is screwed.
Yeah.
And it's an echo of the myth of Bran.
Yes.
Because his head was buried there to protect the island of Britain. And I love that. And it's 300 miles away from my home. 300 miles away from Bran's summer home.
Yes.
But that there was this connection. And so, I enjoy that so much, visiting it. But so you, as a Druid whose home is London, is that Is that apparent? Is it something that do you take that for granted? Because we take so much for granted when we're in a locale and that's where we live. Or is it something that you're like, do you know what? Oh my God, there's so much of my druidry actually reflected in every part of this city, including some stuff that goes back gods only know how long.
Yes. Well, I am aware there is so much I don't know. I mean, the thing about Bran's head being buried in that mount, that's something which I've often found that's been a great point of inspiration for me. And I do find that tale, as somebody who loves story and verse, one of the parts of the Mabinogion that stands out to me is that bit towards the end of the second branch where you have the head keeping company with his beloved friends and companions, and he doesn't have a body at that point.
No.
Everything is the tongue and words and language, and he's telling stories and entertaining. And there's something in that. I think that I think it's easy to forget with Bran that he's the giant, he's the great king. He is also the very noble king, the one who, if you will be a leader, you must be a bridge.
Yeah.
But there is also, he is not just a mighty king of physical power and physical size, but there is this dexterity of thought and dexterity with words and language, which I think we sometimes overlook. And that I find incredibly inspiring. So the idea of his head, as a mythic thing being in that mountain, I find that a really potent idea. There's so many other things that I am aware of. I have to talk about Iolo Morgannwg.
Of course, how can I forget
about Iolo Morgannwg?
Primrose Hill.
So our particular group, we have a point in the year. We do one of our rituals up on Primrose Hill, and one of the things we always do is we go up. There's a little plaque set into the floor with the image of Iolo's face, and then there's some of the, in Welsh, there's the text along the side, which you look over it and you look across this amazing view of London, all the various places.
It's stunning, that view of the whole city in front of you.
Yeah.
And y gwir yn erbyn y byd written around his countenance on top of that hill.
Yes.
So some people might not be aware of that history. Are you able to recount some of what happened on that hill?
Oh, you might need to fill in for me.
You on the spot.
Well, so from what I remember, so Iolo had written and collected this huge wealth of material, some of which was researched, some of which was inspired. Yes, putting it in inspired. And he stood on the top of Primrose Hill, and it was a declaration, basically. He ran, was it the first Druid ritual?
The first gorsedd of Gorsedd of Bards of the island of Britain. 21st of June, 1792. With 12 pebbles from his pocket. Laid out the first Gorsedd circle in London.
Yes.
Right, which is crazy.
Yes.
You think, and that was the birth of modern Druidry as we know it.
Yeah.
It's from that point, and even I always think that when I think of Primrose Hill or when I go to Primrose Hill, that view, because is it Shakespeare's words or Wordsworth's words that are on the bench? Do you know what I mean? There's something there, isn't there, about the sun,
the stone bench that runs along the edge.
I think it might be Wordsworth, possibly. But there's that in front of you, and then the stunning view of the city of London. And I always think that standing on that hill, you can see the various paths that come up to the summit, right?
Yeah.
And I look at those paths, and usually from any position you can see two, and they remind me so much of how the stream and the current of Druidry has left that hill and travelled into the future. And one of them went down a cultural route that gave birth to the Gorsedd of Bards as we know it today within the National Eisteddfod. But the other one went down another path and ended up, coursing through the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and these other occult lodges, and coming to the Universal Bond, and then turning into modern contemporary Druidry as we know it. And it all started there on that hill.
Yes.
So I always find that these places are important places of pilgrimage, contemplation, meditation, because they're a part of the fabric of our history. And but as when you were talking about Bran, then something came to mind, of that assembly of the Wondrous Head.
Yes.
On the island of Gwales. But again, I find it really peculiar, because the thing that strikes me, and again, beg my pardon, because I'm always one for being slightly morbid, but when I go to the Tower of London, they had heads on sticks all around it back in the day. There were severed heads.
Yes.
That's where people lost their heads.
Yeah.
Even that, it's weird, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, heads, severed heads. Oh, Bran's head was severed. It's like there was still that theme running through time. It's really peculiar. But that symbol, and I think I think I'm correct in saying that it was Dr. Gwilym Morris Baird who made this analogy of the head of Bran, the disembodied head of Bran, that it is the perfect symbol for the oral tradition. That head symbolizes something that is dead, but it's alive. But also something that is alive, but it's also dead. And it's a paradox and a contradiction in this symbol of a severed head. And that all it can do is counsel through its mouth. It can't fight anymore. It can't hug you anymore. It can't do anything other than give solace and succor by means of the tongue. You know? And I just think that and words of Gwilym Morris Baird encapsulate somehow the magic and the power of the bardic tradition, and that's what Bran did for 80 years. Was counsel by mouth, and that's something that is such a central part of your professional life. Is what happens through this shrine of inspiration that we've got, our lips.
And I have to talk a bit about, one of the things that I love about the work that I do. So I'm as a voice coach, I'm working with actors to help them use their voices more effectively. And that can mean a number of different things. So there's a basic sense of how do you increase the volume without pushing into shouting. And I do a lot of work with those kind of nuts and bolt skills with the students. Another aspect of the work is accent work. I do a lot of work with shifting accents, helping other people to change those accents. A key part of the work is what's called voice into text. And the voice into text work covers a couple of things. It starts off as, how do you deliver text truthfully? How do you deliver text in a way so that it is not as cold and dead as the words on the page might seem to appear?
Okay.
There's a point I made last night. We were reading a bit of text together as part of the Rhiannon ceremony.
Oh, yes.
And I made a point to people about, so often when I hear people reading that kind of text, ritual text or poetry, you get this sort of falling off in delivery. And it feels very reverent, I think, to do that. But when every line has that reverent delivery, it's like being lulled to sleep. And so much ritual text is written, I believe, to do the opposite. To actually awaken and invigorate and celebrate. And a simple thing that I might do, and this is, one thing, if I can give people homework, this is something I'd love people to do, is to take a poem and make the last word, the word at the end of the line, the most potent word in that line. It can help to think about lifting the pitch, but it's not just about doing that robotically. You've got to, you need to connect to the meaning. But to say the words and make those last words land, so that those last words at the end of the line carry the meaning forward. It changes the nature of the text itself. It invigorates the text, rather than lulling people to sleep with the delivery. And the idea of getting people to do that, particularly in ritual.
So what does that sound like?
Text coming up.
What does that sound like? Can you think of a line that you could give an example?
Well, if I do, okay. One of my favourite texts is "Sometimes a Wild God" by Tom Heron.
Oh, fabulous!
Yeah. So, and I've there's a recording of me doing it on TikTok. It's probably my only TikTok I think that I've ever posted. But the poem starts: "Sometimes a wild god comes to the table. He is awkward and does not know the ways of porcelain, of fork and mustard and silver." Now I'm reading it quite flat at the moment. If the voice follows the meaning, if you carry your intention into the voice, allow your voice to move, let the ends of the lines invigorate, then the meaning carries forward with a very different energy. Sometimes a wild god comes to the table. He is awkward and does not know the ways of porcelain, of fork and mustard and silver. His voice makes vinegar from wine. When the wild god arrives at the door, you will probably fear him. He reminds you of something dark that you might have dreamt, or the secret you do not wish to be shared. So that's just the first two verses.
Yeah.
But to find the colour in those lines and to place the ends of the lines, to make them specific and to make them energized, brings something very different.
And it anticipates the next line,
yes.
Rather than leaving you thinking, "Oh God, where's this going?"
Yeah, exactly.
Driving it forward.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how. So last night we were here in the woods of the Heart of England Conference Centre with 2 rituals.
Mm-hmm.
And this afternoon, a gentleman came up to me and he said, "I wanted to congratulate you and the team," he said, "for those 2 rituals because we felt so moved and so deeply affected by how organised and how you've all used your voices." And I thought that was so lovely because getting that kind of feedback as well is amazing, because you suddenly have this realization that, oh yeah, actually, and maybe because the majority of us in that group are Welsh people,
yes,
and we're aware of this power of voice, but actually, I think it's probably not the first time I've seen you in ritual, but it's the first time I've seen you taking a lead in a ritual, and it makes a massive difference when a ritual facilitator has an understanding not just of the mechanics and technicalities of voice, but the magic of voice.
Yes.
And to Welsh people, I think we find that really exciting because it's kind of, I guess, trained into us that voice is more than just mechanics.
Yes.
It carries breath and carries spirit. It carries intention, and it has the ability to transform and bring things into manifestation.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes when people come into contemporary paganism and they're fairly new to it, we're accustomed to getting our information from books, which you can buy ad infinitum now, very different to what it was back in my day, centuries ago, when they were very, very limited. But they don't necessarily, although they might say, here's a ritual for this, here's a ritual for that, but there's not necessarily much in the tuition of experiential ritual and what you can do with this vessel, this instrument that we've got.
Yeah.
And it was fabulous watching you, because you are a person who understands the power in that. And hearing that gentleman say that today was of no surprise, because that was something you brought and other people felt it. They feel it in themselves. And that's a powerful teaching as well as a ritual activity. Do you know what I mean? But not everybody has that understanding, which I think is vitally important, that people like you who have that understanding are there to help others understand it. It's a fabulous asset.
Well, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you so much. I mean, I could talk about this topic for hours, because the voice has been a passion of mine for so long. And it was a passion of mine even before my voice functioned well. I've told this story before of, as a teenager, I found it incredibly difficult to hold conversations with people. It felt like there was a rock here, and anything I had to say had to make its way through that rock in order to be spoken. And it meant that I might have ideas, but the effort of getting those ideas out was insurmountable. And that difficulty, I think, gave me the inspiration to look closer. The other thing I want to say is that I don't think it's a strange thing that our group, is a Welsh group, and that the voice is part of what we're doing. I think that there's something of the music of Welsh speech, and this, I don't speak Welsh. I know bits of it. I'm learning Duolingo every day. And I'm practicing, and my goal is I want to be able to speak it. I want to be able to write poetry in it.
Wow,
and that desire is your fault, because I read your book on Cerridwen. But to have that kind of muscular, visceral connection into language, which when you're talking about things like the Cynganedd within Englynion, those things I find incredibly exciting. But because in Welsh you almost have to have that music, that when a Welsh person is then coming into speaking English, even the accent carries the music through, so that the speaking of English, there is a music within it which gives it colour and dynamism and really brings those words to life. I remember listening to you reading some of Obod's ritual text. This was it was one time when we did Stonehenge.
The Stonehenge dawn ceremony.
Yeah, and it was it's really struck me how much music there was in your delivery. This is going to sound horribly critical of others, and I really don't want to put other people off, but it stood out, and it stood out because you were speaking English, but the pattern was there. The muscular connection with the accent was there. Listening to Mhara, when Mhara speaks, that same sense of colour and life and energy is there. But I could point to a lot of people within our group and say similar things.
That musicality almost, yeah.
But it brings it through. And, now there's an interesting thing. If we're looking at, you mentioned the Golden Dawn earlier, and if we're looking at the use of voice in ritual, there have been movements to kind of examine the use of voice within ritual. Florence Farr, who's a fascinating character within the history of Western esotericism, an actress, collaborated with Yeats on speaking text. And I haven't done a very deep dive into the work, but I want to. Although I don't think I'm going to like a lot of it, because the idea there was that there was a way of speaking the text that was unemotional but more appropriate to ritual, therefore. Now, there's something in that I really react against.
Somberness?
Well, it's born, I think, from those kind of early 20th century ideas of good speech, which grew into the ideas of, there is received pronunciation, and you have recordings of, the older actors like Irving speaking pieces of Shakespeare, and it's all very declamatory and that sort of thing. The funny thing is, I've heard an interview with an actress who worked with, I think it was Irving, and she said she didn't know where that came from, because that's not how he was on stage. But there was something, there was a feeling that the style needed to be declamatory. What I feel with ritual, that, and I notice it with our group particularly, is that what comes through in that music is passion, is emotion. There is space for feeling, and that, when the voice shakes inside the body to find that feeling, find that depth of feeling within what we're doing, I think that's what draws people in.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to free the voices, to find the movements, to find those colours, so that feeling, that passion for what we're doing can come through. It's something I believe very strongly, and I'd love to see and hear more of that in
Oh,
ritual.
definitely. Because there's more than something that is simply performative. It comes with deep feeling and emotion. And I think when the orator is feeling that within their body and within the energetic component of their voice, it can't be helped but be felt outside of them. And other people then become not just audience, but participants in the energy of it.
Yeah.
If they can feel it.
Absolutely.
And I think there is immense magic in that and mysticism. And of course, performance is important. I always consider that there is so much truth in that saying, which is ritual is the original form of theatre.
Yes.
That
absolutely true. It is that is the basis of modern theatre. You look back to the Greeks and how those started as religious practices, and then playwrights started to get very canny about what they were writing, and then they could write about the human situation. And so it really roots back to those those moments of praise and celebration.
And we have this amazing instrument, and I do find it somewhat discombobulating. It's not to throw shame on anybody. Maybe it is a bit shady, but I don't mean it to throw shame. But I find that when in ritual there isn't. Sometimes I find in some rituals that there can be a disconnect between what is being said and what is happening on the inner landscape and on the subtle planes, but that they actually are all connected, and that this instrument that we've got is an immensely powerful way of articulating the inner landscape and the deeper part of ourselves. And particularly when it comes to Welsh culture, we can accurately say that the Welsh language evolved because of poetry, because of bardism, not in spite of it. It wasn't just an accident. It's this beautiful, complicated interweaving, and it's still there to this day. But it's also there in other languages.
Yes,
it's in all languages.
Listening to a Spanish person reading Lorca's poetry. I don't speak Spanish. I speak barely a word of it. But I listen to someone who is Spanish speaking that text, and it's chills down the spine. A lot of what I've said, I don't mean in anything that I'm saying to denigrate English poetry either. I am a huge fan of Shakespeare, huge fan of the Romantic poets. There are poets of the Romantics I've learned because those speak to me so much and so deeply, because I think that the way the language is crafted, it makes me feel, it causes me to feel. And, I am aware that for a Welsh speaker, Welsh poetry has a very particular resonance. Again, coming back to this idea of the cynghannedd and the patterning within it. I think I do believe any language has the capacity to do that. It's every language brings its own sort of cultural context that allows space for those feelings to come through. I think that's important to remember.
And I think that's what we pick up on when we don't understand a language, but are moved by its music, its poetry, because it's the emotion that we're feeling from the orator. And that is a language in itself, isn't it? And if you're feeling it and you're responding, it's like, well, how can I be feeling sad when I don't know what's being said? And then you discover that poem was really tragic. It's like, well, I felt it. How did I feel it when I didn't understand the words? Because it's tapping into something so much deeper in us.
Absolutely. We know what the sound of grief is. We know when someone is, the feeling of sort of sadness, which, it opens up a particular resonance in the voice. The feelings of delight, of play, upliftedness,
Yeah.
which happen in so many ways. We recognize those resonances,
Yes.
colors, and so much is communicated through that, through what I think we can call the animal part of us. That in
primal,
exactly,
yeah.
that primal part of us.
Almost the first sounds that we ever made are somehow still in us somewhere, and we've just managed to develop them into words and syntax and grammar.
Absolutely,
But they all come from this whatever noises we made in the very beginning.
Yes.
So when it comes to using voice in ritual, I'm aware that a lot of people can feel nervous going into ritual, particularly into public ritual, or where there's several people there, and might struggle to articulate, might struggle to find their voice. And I've certainly had that in my youth, of maybe being told, particularly in school and stuff, that, oh, you'll never be in the Eisteddfod, you're never going to be good enough. But as a vocal coach, how would you encourage somebody to find their voice in ritual or for ritual?
Yeah. The most important thing, I mean, I've been talking a lot about what I would like to hear in voices, and what a voice when it's really explored what it can do, what it's capable of doing, the heights that can take you to. But everyone has to start from a simple place. And like I say, when I was going through that thing as a teenager where I struggled to get words out, and and it was it felt physical. I'm sure it was psychological. One of the helpful pieces of advice I had at that age is, like anything, you are going to fail at stuff. Failure is an inevitability of striving to get better at anything. So, what I really want people to do, if you've listened to the conversation and this is something that you're interested in doing particularly, is to not think you've got to be wonderful before you've gone through the process of kind of learning to get there. So, primarily, keep doing ritual and keep speaking in ritual and keep exploring those texts in ritual, and think. So keep speaking. That's the first thing. Keep using your voice to explore it. The second thing I would say is practice your breathing. Breathing, which a lot of ritual involves an element of breath work. And there are whole sort of courses you can do on how breathing works and ways of managing your breathing. But breath is the fuel for the voice. You need the breath to flow in order for your vocal folds to begin to vibrate, to create the initial sound. Also, if you can learn a little bit about how this functions, it really helps. But you don't have to go very in depth in terms of working out every nut and jot of what's happening. Start working with the pitch range. This is a really important thing. Very often people will think, working on their voices, I've got to be louder. And we want people to be able to be heard in a space. But very often, finding more pitch range through their voices is a really good way to do it. So breath work, working with the pitch, keep it connected to meaning and understanding. Sometimes I would just encourage people, before you pick up the text to read it in ritual, take some time with the text beforehand. Make sure you understand exactly what it's saying. Because sometimes I think we can read stuff and sort of gloss over the meaning, but the deeper your understanding, the better chance your voice has to explore that meaning for the ears of the people in ritual.
Blow it forward, carry it forward.
Because that way you can find nuance. You can pinpoint. Here I can pause to allow this to land. Here, this may be a moment for a slower delivery to consider. And sometimes you do need to move quicker because the energy needs to rise and you need to get things going. And just starting to think about those dynamics always in connection with the meaning of what you're saying.
Mm.
These are things that can start to invigorate the language as you're speaking it.
That's a process of Arwen.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
Blessed holy breath.
Blessed holy breath. And when you covered that, when you talked about that, that was a real sort of
But it is
moment.
profound, right?
It
The
is.
carrying of intention, the carrying of spirit, the carrying of meaning through breath and out into the wider world.
Yes.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Well, I think I can hear that pizza might have arrived.
Ooh, okay.
I can hear in the background some titillation, which I think must be a herald telling us to bring the podcast to a close.
Okay.
But that was fascinating. Thank you so much. That's so insightful.
So welcome.
And also, I thoroughly did. I really enjoyed the fact that you were there, you were leading a ritual last night, and it was a joy to be a part of, and a joy to see a master at work in his craft.
Oh, wow.
Because
Thank you.
I'd not
Thank
had
you.
the opportunity before to see that. And you're a joy to have in this community.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
amazing. So thank you so much. This is Dewi Hughes, everybody. He's rather fabulous. I'm sure you can find him on all the social medias. Can people find you in those places?
They can. I'm on Instagram as Dewi the Voice. I was thinking like Dye the Bread, Dewi the Voice. I am on TikTok, although I'd be amazed if you can find me. And I'm mainly on Facebook. So by all means, come and find me there. And on all of those, I've got me speaking various bits of poetry and that sort of thing. So,
well, thank you very much. Well, thank you for being part of the order. We love having you.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So there we go. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd am wrando. Os da chi angen fwy neu rhagor o wybodaeth amdano'r derwyddon Môn, ewch i'n safle sef angleseydruidorder.co.uk am rhagor o fanylion am ddefodau a cyrsiau a gweithgareddau. Thank you so much for listening and watching to this programme, and to Dewi Hughes for being our guest. If you'd like to know more about the Anglesey Druid Order, our courses, community and rituals, please visit our website at angleseydruidorder.co.uk. Follow us on social media. We're all over Facebook, usually like a rash. And we shall see you next time. Diolch yn fawr iawn I chi gyd. Hwyl am y tro. Bye bye.
Bye.